David, one more thing is we're talking about discussing two things at the same time. I want to explain. Let's explain why Democrats should be very careful at this time. And maybe people want to know, why aren't Democrats screaming and yelling more? Well, let's talk about names in files. How names being in files are not enough. Let's talk about, I'm going to talk about, in this era, the original sin, which was James Comey. I believe it was on July 3rd, 2016, came out and said, we don't have enough information to indict Hillary Clinton, but then went on to indict her in a press conference for 30 minutes. It was outrageous. It's something that the head of the DOJ should never do. He once again put himself into the election 10 days before the election and wrote a letter that was sure to help Donald Trump again, him bending over backwards, trying to be fair, when in fact he was once again, putting his hand on the scales of this election. And so talk about why, even though MAGA world wants this to happen, you don't just release DOJ files because they have people's names in it, again, filled with hearsay, filled with gossip, filled with people trying to get even with others.
Look, I think we should release all the files that are reasonable and lawful to release. Those are the key words: reasonable and lawful to release. And the reason why you have those qualifiers is exactly what you explained, that these investigations sweep far and wide, and they include a lot of extraneous information. Sometimes it's not even relevant to the investigation at all, against a backdrop. Because let's remember, before all of this story changed the way it has changed, MAGA was very, very clear: release everything and arrest everybody on the list. Release everybody, release everything, arrest everybody. That's not how it works. That's not how it can ever work. At the same time, however, there are a lot of unanswered questions about the original prosecution, about Jeffrey Epstein, about his connections, about his money. All of those things are unanswered questions that do deserve answers. So therefore, there should be a reasonable, law-abiding investigation that includes reasonable, law-abiding releases. Instead, what the Trump administration is trying to do is to essentially say, move along, nothing to see here, after many of the people who are saying move along, nothing to see here, had been saying for years, release it all. This is going to wreck the Democratic Party. This is going to wreck the global elite. And then it turns out, oh, Trump's name is in there. Now, we don't know all the context. We don't know if it indicates criminality. We don't know what it indicates. There's so many things we don't know. But then all of a sudden, we learn that Trump's name is in some of these documents, and release shockingly becomes so much less urgent. And we got to focus back on Russia and a fake version of the Russia scandal. So there is so much of this that doesn't pass the smell test. And by the way, the Wall Street Journal applaud their courage. How many institutions have we seen cave? How many institutions? They've been sued for billions, and they're still out there doing the reporting. I mean, they deserve credit for this. And this reporting is demonstrating, what we suspected for some time, that Trump and Epstein had a long-standing relationship. And that long-standing relationship, of course, is going to leak into files, leak into documents. And so the Trump administration does not want to be talking about this. They absolutely do not. So it's Russia, Russia, Russia again.
Russia, Russia, Russia again. And Jonathan, it's interesting, the Wall Street Journal doing their job while Congress adjourns so they don't have to answer any questions or take any votes on the Epstein matter, which again, go and take the votes. We've been talking about why this information shouldn't be released if you're just, doing an Epstein file dump. But again, Mike Johnson, adjourning the business of Washington, adjourning the business of America to try to avoid having his members answering questions and taking votes.
Yeah, and of course there's sensitive material there that shouldn't see the light of day. Underage women in there, other people's names in there. That is pure hearsay. So that, of course, has to be factored in here. And you're right, Joe. First of all, credit, again, let's say it again, to the Wall Street Journal for their fearless journalism here in the face of intimidation. And let's also recall that it was just a week ago, President Trump fielded questions on the White House lawn whether or not the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, had said that discussed his presence in the list with him. He said flat out no. So that clearly now the reporting contradicts that. That appears to be the president less than honest in that moment. So, Allie, as Joe just mentioned here, Congress is gone. Speaker Johnson adjourned the Congress. They wouldn't have to do this. This is clearly such a story that they're so worried about for the president, for Republicans, that they'd rather skip town, close the government, if you will, rather than face it. But before they left, they did do something. The House did. The House Oversight Committee will subpoena the Justice Department to release all unredacted files pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein. So tell us about that, what we might learn. And it does seem, though, this is a moment, at least in narrow ways, that some Republicans are willing to defy President Trump.
Yeah, this is the moment that they found to defy the president. We'll see, of course, if it endures over the course of August, because Republican leadership's thinking here is that they had to skip town a little bit early because they knew that Republicans and Democrats together would have the votes that they needed if they were to bring a resolution that would compel DOJ to release the Epstein files to the floor. If they did that, Republican leadership would see that resolution pass. That is not what they want. And so what we're watching the speaker do here is try to buy the White House and the Department of Justice some time. While he's doing that, allowing lawmakers to leave town early, we've seen a little bit of action on the committee level, and that's partly why I think that leadership's thinking that August and time will kind of fade this issue from the headlines is probably not going to bear out as the right way of thinking, because you're going to see on August 11th now the House Oversight Committee do a deposition with Ghislaine Maxwell. That's one of the pieces that we'll end up following. The other piece of this is that a subcommittee voted to subpoena DOJ records on this. The important thing to remember there is that that subpoena is not ultimately going to lead to just a public release of these documents. That's going to mean that the committee has them, they can read them, and then you have to rely on the members to either vote for that to become public, for them to figure out other means of releasing what they find in that, but still a way that Democrats have been able to. And I think that David is right that it's sort of a balancing act for Democrats here, who have done a good job of trying to kind of nudge this story along at any point where it seems like it could die. They've done a good job of keeping it in the headlines. So that's an example of where they did well on that. But then the other thread that's going to follow them through back to September is this discharge petition, which all it needs is the time to mature and ripen. And right now, it looks like they have the number of signatures that they would need for that discharge petition to force Republican leadership's hand when they come back in September. So I think it's wishful thinking that this is just going to go away with time.